All right, ladies and gentlemen, we got our family member, our friend on the phone, and all I want him to do is just go at it and just start discussing it. He's from Headline HLN. He's got a show called The Evening Express. Please welcome our buddy who's been there the entire time, Ryan Smith.
Hey, everybody. How's it going?
Good
morning,
hey, Ryan. I have no questions for you. I just want you to give me your take on everything that's happened.
Well, how much time you have? I'll tell you. You know, let's start with this. You have this situation in Sanford. This man profiles this young man, and I think a lot of us feel that that's the case. It's hard not to say because he says he looks suspicious, doesn't know anything, doesn't identify. Driving down the street, the police say, don't get out of the car. He gets out of the car. He says to get an address. He walks right by one. This altercation happens. Trayvon Martin dies, and he never has to take the stand to tell his side of the story and gets acquitted. That circumstance of events, those series of events, is almost impossible. It's rare to see that series of events happen in a courtroom. So for me, it's just shocking. And I can completely understand the fact that so many people are outraged because it's something you almost never see. Now, I want to back up on one thing. The laws in Florida, if people are looking for what to do next, it's the laws. Just two quick things. First, in Florida, he didn't have to prove self-defense. All he had to do was basically take what the prosecution gave, put up some witnesses who said it was his voice, and that was that. The second thing is, stand your ground the way it works on arrests doesn't require officers to make an arrest in these kinds of situations. They heard his story, Trayvon Martin wasn't there, and they were allowed not to make an arrest. And those are the things I think we need to change in society and make sure that doesn't happen in other communities. Outside of the racial issues and other issues that come, we got to stand up and change laws if we're angry at verdicts.
Yeah, that's right, Brian. Yeah, that's so true.
I think you're absolutely correct because that's at the core of what got this man free. And that's what his brilliant defense played on and relied on. And that's what the jury was instructed to respond to. But let me ask you this question. In your opinion as an attorney, if you were to grade it A through F, like in school, what grade would you give the prosecution?
I would give them a C. And the reason why is because they dealt with what they had. But they made a mistake. I don't even want to call it a mistake. They took a risk that didn't work out the way they would have hoped, and that was they had a situation, and this is the toughest thing with these cases. The party who was killed is not there, and it's just two people telling the story. What are you going to do? All they could do was offer up the inconsistencies that George Zimmerman told. So what they had to do was put up his story in a bunch of different ways. The effect of that risk, was that his story was already out there without being cross-examined. So at that point, what can you do? And they put up 7 or 8 different stories. But the defense took a risk too. They said, okay, in the majority of self-defense cases you see, the defendant takes the stand. So maybe the prosecution was thinking, we're going to put all this up, but he's got to take the stand and explain himself. I mean, the young man is dead. He's got to get up there and say something, but he chose not to, and that robbed them of the ability to cross-examine him. They tried to do it on closing by trying to highlight the inconsistencies, but it wasn't enough. And that was I don't want to call it a mistake. It was a risk because it's all they had. But that stems all the way back to everything I was talking about. There were so many things that were missing in this investigation. They talked so much about there was no blood on Trayvon Martin's hands, yet George Zimmerman said he tried to cover his nose and mouth with his hands. Well, the investigators didn't even put bags on his hands when they took him to have the autopsy. And not only that, they didn't even preserve the materials very well, and the defense team jumped all over that. There were so many things that these prosecutors had to deal with, and they just tried to do what they could with it. But ultimately, some of their risks came back to really bite them in the end.
See, here was one of the inconsistencies. The marks on George Zimmerman's head, the claim of being slammed into the pavement. But Trayvon Martin was found face down with his hands under his body.
Mm-hmm.
Now, somebody help me. See, once they got into the riding the dummy in the courtroom, I saw a lot of problems with that. Yeah, see, obviously talking to a lot of people ain't never had their ass whooped before. But see, no, on real, man, because I'm sitting up here going, dog, this ain't how a fight really go down. And then if Trayvon Martin was on top of him, slamming his head into the pavement, he reaches in and get a gun, boom. How Trayvon Martin get all the way over in the grass, face down? Dog, it makes no sense.
Yeah, and you know what?
And they said this fight occurred in the grass initially.
Mm-hmm.
See.
And then it moved to see, there are so many points like that. And, you know, in my younger days, I got into fights. I've been banged in the head and had my head split open. And, you know, George Zimmerman had a 2-centimeter cut. Those pictures they kept putting up in the courtroom, people who are watching this trial need to realize that when you get hit in the head, even if it's a small cut, that skin is real tight. It's going to bleed everywhere.
Come on, man.
They kept using that picture to show this was a guy who was in fear for his life, got his head slammed a dozen times. You get your head slammed on the concrete a dozen times, you're not able to get up.
No, partner, this ain't big-time wrestling.
You're knocked out.
Yeah.
Right.
But see, all of that was a lie.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even believe that at any point was Trayvon Martin straddling him.
No.
I don't even believe that.
Yep.
Hey,
I don't even believe that for a moment. And how that became the proper way. And then his father being a judge, the damn police officer that got on the stand and pretty much handed the defense a free man. Man, there's so much. Hey,
it's the whole system. It's the system, and people need to use this to take a look at the system and make sure it works for the people. That's what's key in this.
Hey, man, what we doing next break? Can we bring him back?
Yeah, if you want to bring him back and more calls. Yes, sir.
Hey, Ryan, can you come back in about 4 minutes?
Yeah, I can come back.
Thank you. Hold on.
You're listening to the Steve Harvey Morning Show.
All right, y'all. We're going to continue with Ryan Smith from HLN because he's been so involved with this thing from the very beginning, and he's been there, and he's a lawyer, so you know this makes a lot of sense. Ryan, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
You know, when we were talking earlier, I asked you to grade the prosecution, and you said you gave them a C.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're in a situation like this, I think we've all learned that a C just isn't good enough. And what made let me ask you something, because according to what I know about the law, and correct me if I'm wrong, aggravated manslaughter carries almost the same time as second-degree murder.
Right.
Why would they not try for that charge, and then the burden of proof wouldn't have been as heavy?
Right. And they would have made I think, a stronger argument for it in their closing arguments, because one thing that was interesting about this jury, they came back with a question. They needed clarification on manslaughter. The judge sent them a note back saying, well, let us know what your specific question is. And the next thing we heard was that they had a verdict. That led me to believe that maybe there were some people in that jury room, and I say maybe because I don't know, maybe there were some people in that jury room who thought, wait, maybe it could be manslaughter. And they were maybe convinced at some point that, no, we're going to acquit. So that's a whole other interesting discussion. We see if the jurors speak. But on your point, my sense was that this was a case where the police had basically let George Zimmerman go. The idea was they say the investigation was continuing, but many people thought it was over. So that's when Ben Crump and others started pushing, saying we got to do something about this. The media attention grew, and then outside prosecutors, Angela Corey and her team stepped in. At that point, I think there was a firestorm for people to get some sort of serious charge. And manslaughter, for a lot of people, does not sound like a serious charge. Now, in Florida, it's 10 to 30 if you do it with a gun, if you're convicted, 10 to 30 years. But for a lot of people, manslaughter sounds like a couple years. So I think they went for second-degree murder. They thought there were pieces of it that they could prove. They thought they could prove it, so they went with it. They didn't just do it and say, let's see what happens. I think they thought they could prove it, but I'm wondering if they thought it was a really strong case. The thought is sometimes that you go for second-degree murder, there's a high likelihood the judge is going to say, hey, jury, you can also consider manslaughter. So their thought is they put their case out there. They say that George Zimmerman hated Trayvon Martin. He had spite against him, and that's why he killed him. And they hope that the jury hears that, goes for second degree, and if not, says, well, we got to do something, so let's give him manslaughter. The problem in all this, and it's part of my reason for the C, is that closing arguments, they were arguing their case, and they did a good job on closing arguments. But I walked away from it saying, does this jury really understand what manslaughter is? Do they really understand that it's not intent to kill, but it's an intent to commit an act that leads to the death of someone else?
Yeah,
the
man.
act of shooting. That's something that you could convict on. I don't know if they really understood that.
Right, and he clearly had it in his mind to do something to this child from the moment he spotted him in the neighborhood. I'm going to say this right here. I think that the prosecution was completely out-lawyered, if that's a word. I just think they were just dominated. And, man, I wish I had time. But I'm going to call you back this week, Ryan, because I want to talk about the jury mindset.
Okay.
I want to know what happens in a jury room that causes these types of verdicts to come about. There's got to be some type of mindset, because it's just repeatedly, man, the public sees all the facts and conclusively we come to this, but a jury just can't. Hey, Ryan, thanks a lot, man.
We got a lot to talk about with that. Sure thing.
All right, man, go do your work.
All right, take care.
You're listening to the Steve Harvey Morning Show.